All right, my seller client just sold their house for $527,000, but how much did they actually take home? In today's video, I'm gonna share with you something that not many realtors wanna share, and it's all the closing costs associated with selling your home. I'm going to share exactly what this seller took home after expenses. Before we jump into the video, as a reminder, I'm Mike Thornton. I'm a realtor here in the western suburbs of Chicago. We're a top 1% team in this area, cover everything west of the city of Chicago. So if you're looking to move to this area, connect with us. Our information's in the description. Let's jump right in. This is probably the most common question I'm asked, and it's a great question. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of resources online to share exactly what the costs are associated with selling. So as I mentioned, the sale price we negotiated on this contract was $527,000. A couple of the key closing costs to consider as a seller. First off, there is a realtor commission on the listing side. So I was their agent representing them on the sale. I was helping market the property, and I was working on their behalf. So they paid our commission. Commissions are negotiable. There's no set in stone standard for commissions. However, I will share with you that on this deal, there was a 2.5% commission for us to represent the seller and to pay for all the marketing, all the staging, photos, video, all that good stuff. There's so much that goes into marketing a listing, and that 2.5% is the fee to do such. Now, every state's a little bit different. However, in Illinois, and actually I would say nationally, there's been a new law, but it plays out differently in each state. But as of August 2024, there was a lawsuit in our settlement where basically commissions are now decoupled, where a listing agent enters into a listing agreement with a seller, a buyer with a buyer's agent. So previously, there might be an expectation that the seller pay the buyer agent commission. That is all negotiable. That all depends on how that buyer draws up a given offer. But I will tell you, 8 out of 10 times, 9 out of 10 times in our area here in Chicagoland, buyers are asking the seller to pay it. It's not standard. They don't have to do that. The buyer has the option, and the seller can negotiate accordingly how they want that to play out. But as a listing agent, I am expecting the buyer, as part of their offer, to ask the seller to pay the buyer's agent commission. So in this case, the buyer did that, and the buyer's agent was asking another 2.5%. So far, we have 2.5% for the listing agent, 2.5% for the buyer's agent, and that's just where we get started. Now, those are the two biggest expenses. However, there's another fairly decent expense, which are title insurance policy expenses and title fees. This is the one that not many people know about. So the title company is going to require you, at least in Illinois, to purchase a title insurance policy to protect them, to make sure there's clean title. And that policy ranges depending on the value of the home. Let's just say in this case, it's roughly $2,500. Again, that depends on title company, state. I'm not sure if every state requires that, but here in Illinois, you are definitely going to be paying for a title insurance policy as a buyer and a seller. So you have that fee, and then you have miscellaneous title fees. There's fees to close at the title company. There could be a recording fee for the deed. There could be a wire fee, and miscellaneous fees just to have the title company basically be the person that manages all the money and manages all the disbursements, and to make sure that there's clean title and that all the documents are being recorded properly. Now, as a seller, at least in our state, you're also probably hiring an attorney to help you through the closing process. That could be $600 to $700 for that as well. And when you add all of that up, you are gonna arrive at roughly 6% of your sale price. So roughly 6% is what this seller had from a closing cost perspective. That's gonna come off the top from that 527, and that takes you just under 500,000 that they are taking home. And then obviously some people, many people have a mortgage balance, and that mortgage balance would get paid off at closing as well. And the difference would be the seller proceeds. Now, the last thing I'll say, so taxes, property taxes are the last item that you need to consider. And this is something not many people understand. Property taxes are one of the only things that you're paying after the fact. So you're paying them in what's called arrears. So as we sit here late 2025, a seller, if they're closing in December, they've already paid 2024's bill, because that bill gets paid half in June, half in September, where I'm located. However, the bill for 2025, even though the year is almost closed out, hasn't even come out yet. 2025's bill doesn't get paid until 2026. So rather than that new buyer chasing down the seller to pay that bill, the seller has to basically come up with the prorated amount of the tax that they owe and they have to provide that as a closing cost and a payment to the buyer at closing. It all gets wrapped into the closing costs and the disbursements. However, it's going to show as a closing cost for the seller, even though again, that's money that has to be paid anyway. So is it really an expense? It's going to show up as an expense because you have to pay it early. However, it's something that you would have had to pay anyway. So as you take that into account as well, the proceeds are actually going to be a little bit less, in this case about $9,000 less, because that was the tax proration owed by the seller to the buyer to true up on any taxes owed, so that there's an absolute clean break at closing, and that seller or the buyer does not have to track down the seller for unpaid taxes. So to summarize, you're going to have realtor commissions, you're going to have title insurance policy fees, you're going to have title fees themselves, you're going to have an attorney fee, and then lastly, the forgotten cost is that prorated tax owed that again you would have to pay anyway, but you're going to have to pay that and true up at closing so that you don't have to be tracked down later for that tax owed. Those are all the expenses. So this seller took home just under $500,000. They had about $250,000 left on their loan, the mortgage on that property, so their proceeds were $240 somewhere in there, and that's the money that they got to actually take home, wired from the title company to their bank account on a $527,000 sale. If you want to know more about your situation, if you're located in Chicago, reach out to us. We can help you, give you an estimate on what your cost would be to sell. We could also provide you an estimate on what your home value is. We're here to be a resource for you. Until the next video.